message, Claudio. Oh, okay, so welcome, folks. Today is Thursday, November 10th, and this is the Penn One Board of Supervisors meeting for November. I'm going to call the board to order, and a reminder first that we are video recording this board meeting. So let's see, I've got Jeff Noodleman.
Present.
PJ Christopher.
Present.
And James Allison is present. We have 3 of 5. Annalisa Kohler let us know in advance she wouldn't be here. Maybe Claudio Campuzano will be joining us later.
I just messaged him.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Wendy. With that, should we go into item B, the Business Oregon grant update?
Good. Hi, Colin Rowan, Director of Planning Public Affairs, and wanted to give a quick update on things going on with the Business Oregon Levee grant program, grant that was awarded to Penn One. So I think the last word that the Penn One board received was on August 8th when we sent notice that we had received the award. And I just want to go through just a little quick reminder of the steps that we've taken, where we are now, and what the next steps look like. So again, this grant is related to the Portland Metro Levee study, specifically funding the design phase, the pre-engineering design phase of that project. It's a 3.5-year phase. In August of last year, we received a chief's report for our study, which basically told us that the federal government found federal interest in investing in this project, reinvesting in our levee system, moving it from that feasibility phase that we were in into the design phase. There's a number of steps that need to be taken, but what we really needed to grapple with was how we were going to fund that internally. So as the non-federal sponsor, and Penn One is a non-federal sponsor alongside the 3 other drainage districts, 35% of that phase, the design phase, needed to be paid for by the non-federal sponsor. We had worked with the boards to come up with a funding strategy to, one, go after this grant program that we had helped work in the legislature to create and move from a loan program into a grant program, so be able to tap in some of that funding, and then working with the boards to do equal allocation, 25% of that non-federal share spread across the 4 districts. The agreement that was codified through the resolution 2022-02-01 was to fund that for 2 years, the first 2 years of the 3.5-year PED phase, to split that 25%, so equal share, and then also to create intergovernmental agreement to codify that cost allocation. We, from that, after that resolution was passed, we worked with Business Oregon to put the applications in and put them together. And an important question was asked by Business Oregon, which was relating to the total cost of the phase. And so Business Oregon did not want us to provide a application that was just for the 2 years of a 3.5-year phase if there was any need to have that year 3 and effectively the year 4 paid for by the grant. And so their request was for us to put in an application for the full 3.5 years of PED. And then I had them check to make sure that we'd be able to assign that contract to Penn One, the other drainage district successor, which in this case would be the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District, and there was no issue with having those 4 separate contracts transferred to one entity. And it also would allow that if there's any delays as far as actually creating the new district and getting the funding, it would allow us to still be able to tap in the Business Oregon disbursement. The funds would still we'd still be able to participate with the Corps if we're not able to transition within the next 2 years. That full package was $1.12 million for each district, or a total of $4.48 million. And I just do want to make a note that the first 2 years of PED represent about 70% of the total PED cost. So the out years, years 3 and 3.5 or 4, represent just 30%. So that was awarded in August, and we just received, actually just last week, we received and are reviewing the contract documents. I wanted to bring this in front of the board, let you know what is happening and what the next steps are. So the next steps would be to bring those contracts for approval in front of the boards, and that would be done by resolution at your next meeting. We would also need to amend that resolution that was passed to be inclusive of the full amount that was requested. And then we would still need to go through that cost allocation intergovernmental agreement that will stipulate what the cost sharing will be. So I think I just have one other note. The other note, especially important for Pen 1, and I think this will need further discussion. We still, it's bizarre math. The non-federal share is 35% of the total PED phase, and then the Business Oregon grants will be paying 80% of that, which means that each one of the districts still has to pay their portion of that 20%. We have worked with the City of Portland, Metro, and the Port of Portland to provide contributions to help Pen 1 pay for that cost share. What is currently been requested as part of that 2-year commitment of support would be sufficient to pay for the full 3.5 years, but we would need to work with those organizations to make sure that that could be done, and we can talk about how we would be able to either put that money into a reserve or whatever the correct vehicle for that is. But there is, if those special allocations still can come through in the amounts that were requested, it would actually cover the full 3.5 years of the PED phase. I'll stop there and take any questions you might have.
Any questions? I have one question, or maybe two. What month do you think we'll pass this resolution or update the resolution, Colin?
I would need to connect with Hong to make sure that she's able to, we need to finish the review of the contracting documents, but we'd like to bring it to the next board meeting or sometime subsequent to that.
Yeah, so the resolution will be to approve the the agreement with Business Oregon. We will need, probably given SDIC's role and their independent counsel, will need a little bit more time on that to let him be comfortable with the agreement, knowing that we can't really negotiate those terms. So I would say, Colin, at least the legal work will be about a month. And so working that back from the vote, maybe December or January.
Yeah, and that works well. As far as sort of the timeline on when we actually need this is also important. So we are in both the House and the Senate Water Resources Development Act bill. That's for the construction authorization for the full project. And then we are in both the president's budget as well as the House and Senate budgets for the appropriation for basically year 1 of the design phase. That federal budget has not been adopted yet, and most likely in mid-December, there'll be a continuing resolution. I think the actual federal budget was adopted sometime in March of last year. We're not going to begin that PED phase and need to exchange any funding with the Corps until the spring. So there's not a huge rush, but we would like to continue having this conversation over the next few meetings with the boards.
Great, thank you. And I guess a follow-up question is for, so this would be an IGA between Pen 1 and State of Oregon, is that correct?
The IGA was something that was stipulated in the resolution. That's a cost-sharing agreement between the 4 districts.
Okay.
Yeah, the contract, it will be a contract between Pen 1 and the State of Oregon, and that's for the grant funding.
And then how can the agreements between Metro, the Port, and the city that provide the remaining match, so the agreements between those three organizations and Penn One, do those need to be synchronous at all with this, with the contract, or can those be in development over the next, say, 3, 4, 5 months?
They can. Oh, I'll let Hong was unmuted. Go ahead, Hong.
No, go ahead, Colin.
So I can only speak to what Business Oregon's expectations are from the local match. So we will need to be able to exchange cash to the Army Corps of Engineers. We're really, our contribution is to pay for their design. They'll have both their team as well as consultants working. And it will be done annually, and they can do it sort of as fine grain as quarterly contributions. But ideally, what we need to be able to have is that annual appropriation that we can send to the Corps so that they can basically fund their efforts for the year. So I think it's a long way of answering your question, James, that yes, I think it can be on the same timeline that over the next 3 or 4 months, we can work with the city, the port, and metro to make sure that those agreements are all synced up.
Yeah, and in terms of the cost sharing agreement among the 4 districts, I think that can be mutually exclusive, leaving up to the individual district their own responsibility on their own to fund their share. However that may be, I doubt that SDAC will have an issue and would want to get into the details of how Penn One plans to fund its own share. But the goal would be to have it mutually exclusive of each other.
Great. It's quite a tangled web, isn't it?
It is.
Well, thank you for all the work trying to keep it from getting too tangled up. I know that just for the staff and the board, I know that on the city side, we're starting to develop our thoughts about an IGA between this city and Penn One that funds this PED phase as well as some other activities this year. So we know we need to be mindful of getting that going in November, December. So we aren't waiting to the end until the end of the fiscal year to get that done.
Well, we are November already, so.
I will say that it's really tangled now, but it would have been far more tangled without the successful work Colin led with Business Oregon. So just want to reiterate that getting that $4-point-something million really led us out of the political jungle among the districts on how we were going to approach this cost share. So even though it's complicated, it's less complicated.
Indeed, that was a huge win, a huge milestone. Any other questions from the staff or board? Any comments on this topic? Great. Okay, thank you, folks. All right, let's move on to item C, the fiscal year 22-23 budget update.
Lori, can I just start?
Yes.
I want to just express some personal accountability for the fact that we've discovered some errors in the budget. And I want you to know, as the administrator, I feel like it's on me, and I'm really pleased with Lori and others who have dug in and actually done the hard work to identify some of the areas where we did create some mistakes. But I just want you to know that as soon as we discovered them, there was 100% agreement we needed to elevate them up to the board and show you and own the mistakes. So I am solely accountable for all this. The team is doing a great job trying to look back and figure out what happened so that it doesn't happen again. But I feel really accountable to the board, and I regret that we're having to use your time to bring you these. And I want to thank Lori and Angel and the rest of the team for doing the hard work to identify these things that need to be made more accurate with the board's help. So again, my regrets for the mistakes. As your administrator, please hold me accountable for that. And thanks to Lori for identifying them and bringing them to your attention.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to turn my camera off because for some reason I'm having some internet problem, and I do want to pull up the schedule so that you can see the numbers I'm talking about. So let me do that. This schedule is also included in your packet, but I wanted to pull it up to follow along with where I'm at. So in your packet today, there's a schedule and memo providing information on a series of budget corrections that we've identified in relation to the 2022-23 adopted budget. The first column that you'll see in my schedule is the budget that was adopted in June of 2022. In column 1, you'll see that we're making a correction of $62,376 to the beginning fund balance. That's good news, right? We have more money available than what we thought when we originally did. So that's adding money in. In column 2, there's a correction for the JCA contribution for this district. We've identified some budget corrections in the JCA adopted budget that are providing a reduction to the amount of support needed for JCA in 2022-23. So that's a $39,000 adjustment for Pen 1. Some of our other local partners will also be getting those correcting adjustments as well. And we've updated the IGA between all of the funding partners to reduce their contributions for this year. In column 3, this is an interesting, we have actually identified that the board had requested some changes to the budget between the proposed budget and the approved budget. What was brought to the board for budget adoption was the proposed budget. So those corrections did not come to you in your budget appropriation resolution. So this column right here is making those corrections, getting the adjustments that you had requested between proposed and approved into the adopted budget. In column 4, we're making just a small correction to the principal and interest payments that have to go out this year. So the budget was understated by about $6,000 as to what our principal and interest payments are for the year. In column 5, there's some corrections to revenue. The service contract revenue is being reduced by $242,000. Stormwater fee revenues were overstated in the adopted budget by this amount. So if you follow that adjustment down, this is the one that I really want to make you aware of. That ends up with a reduction to your ending reserve. So where we had originally budgeted that we were going to have $193,000 in capital reserves, we're not going to have that much. We're only going to have $94,000, so $100,000 less than we originally anticipated. We have not identified in the budget any reductions that would allow us to maintain that capital reserve number. If that's something that the board is interested in having us take a look at, we certainly could try, but this budget for this district is pretty tight, so it would be difficult to identify $100,000 just in order to leave money in that capital reserve. So what we're asking the board to consider at this point is to consider the corrections that we've detailed here and approve a motion to update the budget for this fiscal year for these corrections. I'm going to pull this down off of the screen now and try to bring myself back on video. I will say too that we'll be coming back to the board in January with revised forecasts. So this is really getting us ready for that new budget process for the upcoming year. So starting out in the new budget process, we'll be doing a revised forecast so that you can see based upon actual activity where we're projecting to be for the end of the year. But we wanted to get these corrections into the budget first so that we would be starting in the right place. I can take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Lori. Jeff?
Hi, thanks, Lori. Great presentation. I actually have the numbers here. I'm going to pull them up. So okay. just tell me, you don't have to bother, but it's just about column 3. And I get it. I understand, I think the intent, but philosophically versus kind of what are we doing? Okay. Day one, be it in your own personal household or an agency like this one, folks like yourself, the staff, the board come together, they adopt a budget. Okay. At the end of the fiscal year, you either on budget, you did better than budget, or you did worse than budget. That's the way I see the world. You know, I'm not an accountant, but if we modify, and not just we, if there are modifications to an already approved budget, I guess maybe I'm just being thrown by the in your column 3, the use of the word incorrect. Did we foot a number incorrectly, or we did say, hey, you know what, the numbers are going to not be what we think they are, so we need to modify the budget? Explain to me, really what it is, because otherwise,
Sure.
If you're always modifying the budget, you'll always be on budget.
So yes, that's a very good point. So this is really getting aligned with the board. So so normally what the budget process is for a government entity is that the staff will come to the board with a proposed budget. The board will contemplate what's in that proposal and will potentially make changes to get to the stage that we call the approved budget. And last year, when we were in this process, this board said, we want some changes. We want to reduce these revenues by 163,000. We want to reduce this capital outlay by 211,000. The budget, then that approved budget with those corrections in it should have came to the board for adoption. It did not. What came to the board for adoption was the proposed budget. We're researching to try to figure out how that happened. We are putting some controls in place to make sure that those versions get tracked properly and that the correct version comes to the board for adoption. But I felt like it was really, and I understand what you're saying. I mean, in the end, you're either going to be over or under. My normal process with a budget like this is you would have an adopted budget. If you come across a situation where you are going to overspend your appropriations, you would see me come back to the board and say, I need to do a budget transfer to make sure that I have dollars aligned in the correct alignment so that I don't overspend my appropriations. Or if I get a grant in, for example, I would come to you with an appropriation with the revenue and the expense so that we have the authority to do the spending. But in this case, it was just a simple fact that you didn't adopt the budget that you thought you were adopting. And so I wanted to really clean things up for you and make sure that the budget that you adopted is what we have in the system.
All right, that's incredibly helpful. All right, thank you. And again, maybe the staff is being too hard on themselves. I think the use of the word incorrect is not fair to anybody really. And I understand. And I don't think there's a need for a forensic investigation. I mean, I get it. Things happen. And I think as long as you have the safeguards in place going forward, let's move on. But okay, that's very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just for me, y'all, I just feel a deep accountability to bring you transparency when we make mistakes. Especially when it comes to finances, just feels like the right thing to do. And again, we're looking back at how things went. And I think you're all aware we had a lot of transitions over the last year. And so we're studying the situation and trying to make sure that we attempt to identify what happened and prevent it from happening in the future.
Great. Thank you. Claudio?
Yeah, no, Jim, I just wanted to say thank you for your leadership on, and just modeling what I think is great organizational behavior, both for your staff and for us as the board. Being able to talk about places where we didn't, we didn't meet our own standards is important, and putting in place a plan to address it is awesome. That's an environment where we can actually learn and grow, and I really thank you for your leadership there. So, and I don't know, I appreciate the sort of discussion about column 3, and I don't know that, it sounds like there's still some more lessons to be learned. I would be, I think I'm particularly curious about column 5. That's the stormwater fee. That does seem like an area where it's a big number. It's a place where we should have some pretty good historicals. So I'll just be curious to kind of understand a little bit about, and this may not be the right time or for that, and I'm sure that you guys will come back to us with whatever salient lessons you've got. But that one seems like one we really want to make sure we nail down, because that's bread and butter stuff.
And just schedule wise, I think we have another week or so with our fact finding, and then we should be able to sit down with all the sort of objective view of the information we've been able to gather, and then we can ideally make some decisions or take some actions to address the weaknesses that we have availed ourselves of in the last year.
So this one too, I would just say, Claudio, this is a very complicated calculation, but we do have a long history of worksheets that help us to understand how those numbers are calculated. And in this case, it just was not calculated consistently with what the IGAs say, what the agreements say, and what we've done in the past. So we've done some real digging into that calculation. I've had some support from my team on that to make sure that we're calculating it correctly. I will say that the bills did not go out with incorrect numbers. We caught it before we sent the bills out to the city of Portland. So those corrections have been made, and we feel confident. There's been a review process now of the new calculation, and we feel confident that we've got the correct numbers, which is why we're coming to you to say, hey, that revenue was too high. We identified it actually by just comparing it to prior years. So, which is a simple little technique you learn as an auditor, like how do things look in comparison to where it's been before? And if it looks different, was there something that changed? And in this case, we're like, wow, nothing's really changed. So we dug into it and we're able to figure out the calculation. It's impacting us on all of our districts. So we will be making adjustments across the board, and I'll be having these discussions several times in the next few weeks. But we do feel confident that we've identified the process. We've got it well documented now and have some good understanding about how it is supposed to be performed going forward. So I will assure you that we are putting a review process in place with everything that we issue out of my department. And we will do our best not to make mistakes. And when they do, you'll know about it, because I don't like to hide these sorts of things. I want you to be aware and be aware of the process that we're going through to make corrections.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I have just one quick question. It looks like there's no impact to operations and investments, kind of our planned activities this year, but it does reduce capital reserve. Is that,
Yes.
And I know that all the board members and the board has been working diligently to put Penn One on sound financial footing with a lot of help from the staff, of course. Is there anything we need to be mindful of now with that lower number?
I just think the awareness that the number wasn't quite as high as what was represented to you. It wasn't surprising to me when I looked at the history and kind of looked at the revenues that have been coming in. I know that we've been doing a lot to try to stabilize things, and the city has been doing a lot to provide us support, but it seemed odd to me that there would have been that kind of a bump up in the reserve this year. It was not consistent with what we've seen in the past. So this is more what we would have expected it to be, unfortunately. I'm just sorry that I have to tell you that you don't have quite as much there as what you thought you did.
Great, thank you. Jeff, do you have another question? Okay, that's it. I'll take that as a high five. Okay, any other questions? Oh, okay. Let's move on then to.
So we do need a motion if you
so I'm
all
sorry.
are
I was already
willing to accept these corrections. Wendy, do you have that language for folks?
It's in the chat. I think I'll go ahead and make a motion because I found out recently that I can. I move to approve proposed budget adjustments for the 22-23 fiscal year as documented in attachment 1.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion? Okay, with no discussion, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Claudio Campuzano.
Aye.
PJ Christopher.
Aye.
Jeff Middleman.
Aye.
James Allison votes aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you to the staff.
Thank you, board, for your understanding, and regrets again for needing to require your time on this. And thanks to Lori and Helen and the rest of the team for figuring it out and making it right.
Great, thank you. I have one question. We have items E and F, so questions or new business. Were there any questions or anything from the staff on there was a financial report that also in the packet, and was the financial report and the contracts report just there for our information, or was there any intention of discussion about that?
We're happy to discuss any questions or concerns you have, or highlight any of the fun things we're working on, but no, it's included in your package just for your information, and we're trying to do that to avoid spending time that you guys can read instead of being all together like this. If you'd like to change that, we're willing.
No, I think I will jump in with a question, just because it's, I don't want this to go unnoticed on my part, which is the issue of cash flow. I had obviously kind of connected to the previous discussion about intergovernmental agreements needed and revenues from the city of Portland to Pen 1. I'm just noticing that, at least I think I noticed that our assessment revenues and other revenue are minimal, and our expenses obviously are much greater. You know, I think we're showing somewhere around $1,500 in revenue for this fiscal year, and we already have about $75,000 in expenses. And I'm not aware entirely of the cash flow, how the cash flow works for the organization, but I just want to be mindful that I know that Pen 1 is expecting a couple of payments from City of Portland, most notably the $197,000 for operational support. And I just want to make sure there's nothing we need to worry about in terms of cash flow as a board.
Sure. So this is not unexpected because our assessments actually come through with property taxes. So we'll start to see that money coming in now that the tax bills have gone out. So we do monitor this on a regular basis. And I did have a conversation with Janet about this earlier this week, just to make sure that we were still running okay with our cash flow. She's watching it very closely and has given me the thumbs up that so far we're doing okay. I mean, obviously we will need to have that money coming in from the city. Otherwise we won't be keeping up our operations. But for this point in time, we're doing fine with that cash flow, and we'll continue to manage that.
Great, thank you, Lori. And then I guess my second question is, looking at the expenditures on the operations side, you know, a little over $29,000. I assume this is through September 30th. So less than 10% of our budget for the first quarter, knowing that we spend more money in the winter. Are there any operational, based on our spending to date, are we in a good position based on our budget?
We should be in pretty good position. We'll be coming back in January to kind of give you that status report as where we're projecting to be, because we have the fixed fees adopted for the services that MCDD provides to the district. That stabilizes you on a big piece of that because it's going to be equivalent to what your budget is. So really it's just going to be what are those variances in the projects and how are we doing with those? So for now, we're feeling good about where we're at, and we'll provide you more information about those project projections and where we think we're going to end the year when we come back in January.
Great, thank you, Lori. Any other questions from the board? Comments? Okay. In that case, Jim, did you want to highlight any? I appreciate the executive director's report being attached. It was great to read that, and very nice to have a shout out to an employee Nicole Handley, for the Mission Vision Values Award. I don't know Nicole, so it was great to see her name.
I think the thing that I would highlight for you all is sort of where we are with the urban district. And James, you're fully ensconced in that, but we have provided, again, with a lot of work from our finance team, a proposed fifth year operating revenue forecast. And next week, could even be this afternoon, you're going to receive the initial cost scenarios about how that 5-year forecast dollar amount could be spread across the landscape of our new district. So we've made substantial progress in advancing the revenue work. I think what I'm observing is with the 17-member board, we're not going to get a consensus direction from you all. So we're working with some professional facilitators and so on to figure out how do we both manage the details of the information and make sure board members are comfortable, but also force you guys to probably move into more of a voting posture in order to keep things moving. So I think the other thing that I would highlight for all of you is we continue to struggle a little bit with the cost of collecting the revenues. And so for those of you who are affiliated with municipal governments, we would appreciate your assistance in strategizing with us in how we can be most effective in getting our municipal partners to include our fee on an existing bill. So if that is the case, we think it will be very beneficial to the ratepayers in our new district and to the district itself. We're making some good progress with the East County cities, and obviously we have lines of inquiry into the city of Portland, and we're working with Steve Fancher on Gresham. So our hope is we can reduce that cost pretty significantly through some requests for assistance from our awesome partners. So those are the two things that I think I'd like to highlight for you. Operationally, I think things are going okay. It was really nice. It was a year ago tomorrow that we had flooding due to our inability to get to pump station 4. So in reflecting back on how far we've come, that entire area is in a significantly improved condition than it was a year ago. And that's allowed our team to do their work in a much more efficient way. So we're grateful to everybody who's helped move forward on that. I think I'll stop there. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions or comments for Jim or staff?
I appreciated getting Emily's update as the rain was pouring down the other day. And then also to further to Jim's comment, not only the Nicole Hanley, but also the award for Charles Crisp. I love stuff like that. So congratulations to both of them.
Yeah, and it'll be fun to be giving that one out a little more frequently. We're trying to incent ourselves to look for things that people are doing well. And it's nice to give them an excuse to do that. So we're excited. It was really cool of Charles to put that together. And when he first showed it to me, it's like, you can't tell that it had that much thought put into it with parts and things coming from each of the districts. And he did a lot of it on his own time. So it was, if you know Charles, it was pretty cool that he did it. And it lights up, as Wendy says. It's pretty neat. Anyway, thank you for acknowledging we do have people who work really hard. So it's nice to try and give them a pat on the back every now and then.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And I do want to mention it'll be interesting for all of us to see updates on where the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District revenue conversation is going. I will tell you, though, that it's moving. It's interesting to see how things keep moving forward. And the only way I can describe it is it's getting real. I mean, we're really starting to put together budget scenarios based on programs and FTE. And so it's just a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty, and certainly not agreement at this point, but very thankful to the staff that they keep moving this conversation forward. And it's nice to see fewer staff on the call today. I just know that probably means that the staff are doing something else somewhere else, because the maintenance of the 6 boards has been quite a feat, and it seems like we're really continuing to move in the right direction. And so I look forward to updates being shared with the board. Before we sign off, I do want to thank the staff for being here, and definitely thank PJ, Claudio, and Jeff for being here today and making time for this. And hope everybody stays safe and warm out there, and hope you're enjoying your fall and trying to get away from your cubicle in the office or your attic or whatever the case may be. And I think with that, we're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.